Before we dive into today's intense story, a quick reminder. Over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but aren't subscribed. If you enjoy content like this, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And if you find this story gripping, don't forget to like the video. It really helps us out.
I used to believe that love, once promised and sealed with vows, was unshakable. That once you said, "I do," it meant forever. But the truth is, life doesn't always follow the stories we tell ourselves. And I, of all people, should have known better. I was 28 when I married Amir. I was a teacher, grounded, independent, and proud of the life I had built for myself. Amir was the kind of man who walked into a room and commanded attention, not with loud words, but with a quiet confidence. He was a civil engineer, respected in his field, calm and methodical in everything he did. At least that's the man I thought I married. Our relationship wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was steady, built on friendship, mutual respect, and the shared belief that we wanted the same things out of life: stability, growth, and eventually a family. We dated for 2 years before he proposed in the simplest way possible, over tea at my parents' house, just the two of us in the garden. No theatrics, no grand gestures, just honesty. That's what I liked most about him then. He made me feel safe. The first few years of marriage were smooth. We bought a modest apartment together, combined our finances, and settled into routines. Mornings started with tea and soft music. Evenings ended with quiet dinners and the occasional movie. We traveled a little: Marie, Skardu, even a short trip to Turkey once. Everything seemed okay on the surface, but maybe that was the problem. Everything was just okay. The cracks were small at first. Amir became quieter, more withdrawn. He started coming home later than usual, citing site visits and deadlines. He would be on his phone often, more than usual. But when I walked into the room, the screen would go black. He said I was overthinking, that I should trust him. And I did, for a while. I began to feel invisible in my own home. Conversations became robotic. "How was your day?" "Fine." "Want to eat now or later?" "Later." We went weeks without touching, without any real connection. I blamed stress, work pressure, maybe even the fact that we didn't have kids yet. I internalized it all, thinking maybe I needed to be more understanding, more patient. Then one evening, I saw a name flash across his phone: Zara. It happened so fast. He was in the shower and his phone lit up. I hadn't meant to look, I really hadn't, but the heart emoji next to the name made something twist in my stomach. I knew who Zara was. She worked at the firm he collaborated with occasionally. Younger than me, prettier maybe, and definitely the kind of girl who didn't care about boundaries. I'd met her once at a company dinner. She laughed too loud and touched Amir's arm too easily. I told myself then that I was being jealous, insecure. But that night I opened the messages. I wish I hadn't. The texts weren't explicit, but they didn't have to be. There was flirting, late-night check-ins, little emojis, inside jokes, even a picture of her in a dress asking, "Do you think this is too much for the office tomorrow?" And his reply, "Only if you're trying to make it impossible to concentrate." I stood in our bedroom, phone in hand, heart racing. My world didn't shatter with a loud crash. It cracked silently, painfully. I felt stupid, ashamed, betrayed. When he came out of the shower, I confronted him. I didn't yell. I just asked, calmly, "Who is Zara?" His face changed in a second. Panic, then guilt, then denial. "She's just a friend," he said. "We joke around, but it's nothing." I showed him the texts. He tried to explain it away. Said it was harmless, said I was overreacting, said I was trying to sabotage our marriage over a few messages. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not then. I just looked at him and said, "I want the truth, all of it." That night, I learned more than I ever wanted to know. It wasn't just messages. They'd had coffee, dinners, and though he swore nothing physical happened, the betrayal was already complete. Emotional cheating hurts in ways that are harder to define. It isn't about one night or one act. It's about being replaced, emotionally erased. He apologized, repeatedly, begged me not to leave, said it was a mistake, that he got carried away, that he missed feeling seen, that Zara made him feel young again. I listened, not because I forgave him, but because I needed to understand how the man I married had turned into someone I didn't recognize. I didn't leave him that night. Some people will judge me for that, but I needed time. I needed to think. I needed to know what I was dealing with. The next few weeks were tense. Amir became the husband I had always wanted him to be. Attentive, apologetic, present. He even suggested we go to therapy. And we did, a few times. He said he ended all contact with Zara, blocked her number, deleted everything. For a moment, I believed things might get better. But my trust was gone. And once trust leaves, love begins to pack its bags. I started noticing everything. How he avoided certain topics. How his phone was always on silent. How he changed his passwords. Again, I didn't want to become a paranoid wife, but I wasn't paranoid. I was observant. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I started paying attention to someone else. His name was Danish. He worked at the school as our IT consultant. Kind, soft-spoken, intelligent. He wasn't particularly handsome, not in a dramatic way, but there was something steady and warm about him. He made me laugh. He listened, and he noticed when I was sad, even when I tried to hide it. At first, it was nothing. Just passing conversations, shared coffee in the staff room, little jokes about printer malfunctions. But slowly, I started looking forward to those moments, to him, and that terrified me, because I knew how slippery the slope was. I knew how easily loneliness could disguise itself as affection. I wasn't looking for an escape or revenge. I was just trying to feel human again, seen, heard. One day, Danish and I stayed late at school during a software update. It was just the two of us in the computer lab, the hum of the machines the only sound between us. He asked me if I was okay, really okay, and for the first time in months, I told someone the truth. He didn't judge. He didn't push. He just said, "You deserve honesty. You deserve peace." That night, I went home and stared at Amir as he slept beside me. I wondered when we had become strangers. I wondered how many nights he had looked at me and felt nothing. I wondered if I could ever feel safe with him again. The answer came quietly. Number I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the balcony sipping cold tea and made a decision, not because of Danish, not because of Zara, but because I had lost myself in this marriage. I had become a version of me that I didn't recognize, quiet, insecure, uncertain. The next morning, I asked Amir for space, a break, time apart. He resisted, begged, cried even, but I stood firm. I moved in with my cousin for a while, took time off from school, and for the first time in years, I breathed. And that's when I began to plan, not revenge, not destruction, something more powerful, something called reinvention. When I left our apartment, I didn't take much, just a suitcase, some books, and my dignity. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't even slam the door. I just walked out quietly, as if I were slipping out of a version of myself that no longer fit. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to save a marriage. I was trying to save myself. Living with my cousin Mariam was supposed to be temporary, but those weeks turned into months. She gave me space without questions, without judgment. Her home became my quiet sanctuary, a place where I could sit with my thoughts, reflect on everything, and slowly rebuild. In those early weeks, I cut off all contact with Amir. I needed silence. I needed distance to figure out if there was anything left in me that still wanted him. He sent texts, some long and emotional, some short and desperate. I read them all but didn't respond. My silence wasn't meant to punish him. It was for me. I needed to hear myself think. Danish and I didn't speak much during that time. A few polite messages checking in, but nothing deep. I didn't want to jump from one emotional entanglement into another. I wasn't looking for a replacement. I was trying to find out who I was without anyone else defining me. I spent time journaling, reading books I had abandoned, going for long walks in the park. I even took up painting, though I wasn't particularly good at it. The point wasn't the result. It was that my hands were moving again. My heart was opening to something that didn't involve pain or betrayal. People started asking questions, of course. Teachers at school whispered behind closed doors. Family members dropped passive comments about working things out and not letting a small mistake ruin everything. But I had learned something important. No one truly understands the weight of your decision unless they've carried it too, and I wasn't going to shrink just to make others comfortable. After nearly 3 months apart, Amir requested a meeting. In person, he said he had something to say. One final time. I agreed, not because I was hoping for reconciliation, but because I needed closure. We met at a quiet cafe near the old university library, a place we used to visit during our dating days. He looked tired, older, as if the months had aged him more than the years ever did. I suppose grief does that to people, even when it's self-inflicted. He apologized again, this time without excuses. He admitted to more than he had before, said he had met Zara multiple times and that their relationship had crossed lines, emotionally and physically. He said it started during a rough patch in our marriage, but he didn't blame me. He took responsibility, said he had been selfish, weak. He told me he regretted it all, that he missed me, that he realized too late what he had lost. And for a moment, I felt sorry for him, but only for a moment, because while he was busy missing me, I had been busy finding myself. And I realized I didn't want to go back to the version of life we had built. I didn't want to wake up wondering if the man beside me was telling the truth. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life checking his phone when he wasn't looking or pretending things were fine when they weren't. So I thanked him for the apology, and I told him that I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. But forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. And I made it clear. I wasn't coming back. He cried. I didn't. I walked away from that cafe with a strange mix of sorrow and strength. I mourned the man I once loved, but I also celebrated the woman I was becoming. Returning to work after a long break was another challenge. There were whispers, curious glances, but I ignored them. I focused on my students, on creating lesson plans that excited them, on building something that felt meaningful. And slowly, Danish became part of my days again. Not in a romantic way, at least not at first. He was respectful of my space, never overstepping. We talked more during breaks, shared articles, discussed podcasts. He introduced me to meditation. I recommended books. There was no urgency between us, no expectations, just understanding. One Friday afternoon, as we were both leaving the school, he asked if I wanted to join him for a hike the next day, just as friends. I agreed. That hike changed everything. We talked for hours about life, about our fears, about things we had never shared with anyone. He told me about his father's death, how it had shaped his need for stability. I told him about the loneliness of being in a marriage where you feel more like a roommate than a partner. At one point, we stood at the top of a ridge, looking out over the city. It was golden hour. The light made everything seem softer. I turned to him and said, "I don't know what I want next, but I know it's not what I had before." He nodded. "You don't have to know. You just have to be honest about what you feel right now." And in that moment, I felt seen. We didn't hold hands. We didn't kiss. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was deeper. It was two people who had walked through fire, recognizing the strength in each other's scars. Over the next few weeks, we spent more time together, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. And yes, eventually, the bond deepened. But it wasn't the kind of fast-burning love that consumes and then dies out. It was quiet, steady, intentional. when Amir sent the final divorce papers. I didn't cry. I signed them on a Sunday morning while the sunlight streamed into the room I had learned to love as my own. I brewed myself a cup of tea, the same way I used to for both of us, and I sipped it slowly, alone, peaceful. Divorce is a strange thing. It doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like a clearing, a space where new things can grow if you're brave enough to plant them. I wasn't bitter anymore. I didn't hate Amir. I didn't wish him harm. I just didn't want to carry his choices anymore. A few months after the divorce was finalized, I moved into a new apartment, small but filled with light. I painted the walls myself. I bought plants I wasn't sure I could keep alive. I threw a small housewarming party. Only close friends, no drama. Danish brought homemade brownies and a toolbox and helped fix a wobbly shelf. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. One evening, I found an old photo album tucked away in a drawer. It was filled with memories, wedding pictures, travel snapshots, blurry selfies from ordinary days. I flipped through them slowly, smiling at some, wincing at others, and then I closed the album and placed it back in the drawer, because my story wasn't there anymore. It was here. In this new chapter, it's strange how life can hurt you, break you, and still give you the space to start again if you're willing. I didn't think I would ever feel whole after everything I had been through. Betrayal changes you. But what I've learned is it doesn't have to define you. After the divorce, I started creating new rituals for myself. Sunday morning walks, fresh flowers on my table every Friday, journaling under the soft light of a desk lamp before bed. I didn't do these things to forget the past. I did them to reclaim my present. My relationship with Danish developed slowly. There was no need to rush. He knew I was healing. Some days I would pull away, afraid of being vulnerable again, but he never pressured me. He stayed patient, quietly reminding me that love wasn't supposed to be chaos. It was supposed to feel like home. It was the little things that made me realize how different this was. He remembered my favorite kind of tea. He noticed when I wore something new, even if it was just a different scarf. He listened, not just to my words, but to the silence between them. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was competing for attention or affection. Still, part of me feared what people would think. A divorcee starting over so soon. A new relationship forming not long after an old one ended. But I reminded myself, this wasn't about what others saw. This was about how I felt, and I felt free. One afternoon, I received a message from Amir. Simple, respectful. I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to say I'm truly sorry again for everything. I've started therapy on my own. I'm working on myself. I don't expect anything. Just thought you should know. I stared at the screen for a long moment, and then I typed back, "Thank you. I hope you find peace." That was it. No anger, no unfinished business. Just two people who once shared a life, now on separate paths. Later that night, I told Danish about the message. He didn't react with jealousy or suspicion. He just said, "You're allowed to have a past. What matters is where you're going, not where you've been." I think that's when I knew. I had found someone who understood love not as possession, but as presence. We didn't talk about marriage for a long time. There was no need. We were building something real, something that didn't need validation from society or timelines. But one evening, as we watched the sunset from my apartment balcony, Danish turned to me and said, "Whenever you're ready, I'd like to grow old with you." I smiled, not because it was romantic, but because it felt safe. And that's what I've learned above all else. The greatest revenge after betrayal isn't anger. It isn't bitterness. It isn't proving a point. It's peace. It's waking up with clarity. It's choosing joy after pain. It's living fully, not despite what happened to you, but because you chose not to let it destroy you. I am not the same woman who once stood in the kitchen, wondering why her husband was smiling at someone else's messages. I'm stronger now, softer too. And I've learned that endings aren't always tragedies. Sometimes they're just the beginning of the story you were meant to write all along.